Depression is a big problem. It affects 1 in 7 New Zealanders. It costs New Zealand $1 billion every year, and we lose 500 people every year to suicide. It's a big problem, and we don't really understand it yet. What leads to depression? Why is it that 2 people can live similar lives, but only one of them goes on to become depressed? I'm interested in what makes someone vulnerable to developing depression. You can see here that this person has less activity over the left frontal part of their brain than the right. We call this pattern of brain activity frontal brain asymmetry, and it's a well-established marker of depression vulnerability. We see this asymmetrical pattern in people who are depressed, but we can also see it in people who have never experienced depression before, and it tells us that these people are more likely to go on to develop depression in the future. But what's going on in these parts of the brain that less activity on the left and more on the right means you're more likely to get depressed? We don't know yet, and that's what I'm looking at in my research. What thinking processes underlie depression vulnerability? We think that these parts of the brain, which are called the left and right dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, are responsible for ignoring or suppressing information, and that the left side is particularly important for ignoring negative things. So our theory is, if you have less activity over the left, maybe you can't ignore negative things very well, and so you become more overwhelmed by them. And you can see how this might lead to depression. But there's nothing yet that tests this idea. So that's what I'm doing. Using electrodes, I record people's brain activity and I see if they display this vulnerable pattern. Then I give them a computer task and I tell them to focus on the task and ignore everything else. But while they're doing the task, I also flash up gory images of mutilated bodies. What I look at is whether the people with this vulnerable pattern of activity get particularly distracted by the gory images. Are they particularly bad at ignoring them? If they are, then it suggests that 1, this area of the brain on the left is important for ignoring negative things. 2, having less activity here means you can't ignore negative things very well. And 3, not being able to ignore negative things may make you more vulnerable to depression. This would be great to know, because it would reveal an important difference in the way that vulnerable people think. But I'm only halfway through collecting my data, so we're going to have to wait and see. This research will help us to understand better depression vulnerability better. If we can understand what's different about the way a vulnerable person thinks before they get depressed, what processes might be going on unnoticed before disaster strikes, then we'll be in a stronger position to protect people against the disorder. Thank you.